Hello and welcome to the MAC weather page for this Tuesday, March 5th. And as we've been talking about since back in early February, we would finally see maybe a snap to pretty mild conditions, but it wouldn't be until around the 10th or the 15th of March. And again, looks like that's right on schedule as we have a couple of storms. Looks like they're going to go to our west. Again, we got to watch each storm and the track closely, but right now they appear to going to move off to our west, and that'll bring a surge of warm and rainy conditions into the area. The first one coming Saturday night into Sunday, and we could see some flood issues here by this time next week. Again, but two more very cold days coming up with lows in the single digits to around 10 and highs only in the teens. So again, a couple more very cold days. We'll begin to see our temperatures get closer to normal, and then above normal as we get into next week. And again, I think overall, we're in a much milder pattern coming up. So it looks like we're going to finally break the back of winter here as we move into a warmer pattern. If you look at the satellite, you can still see the very cold conditions that settle in, especially across Wisconsin, northern lower Michigan, back into Minnesota. And again, you can see our lake effect snows moving across Lake Michigan into southwest lower Michigan. And off to the west, this is the beginning of a warm surge of moisture and warmth that'll eventually be overspreading much of the Midwest and Great Lakes here as we go through the next several days into next week. As far as the radar this morning, you can see there's also a weak system aloft. Again, that's enhancing some of the snowfall across southwest lower Michigan. Again, the lake effect in our big five lake effect counties in northwest lower Michigan and that area along into the east of Marquette, with the cold winds coming from the northwest off Lake Superior, adding to the snowfall in those areas as well. As far as temperatures out there this morning, you can see, first of all, the winter weather advisory for that lake effect snow, again, mainly from 131 to the west. And with all the clouds and the breeze out there, temperatures are pretty consistent across the area. The warm spot, 10.9 at Henderson, the cool spot at Lakeview and Marlette at 7.4. And if we look at the weather map this morning, again, you can see, as we talked about yesterday, those series of cold fronts coming down out of the north with that high pressure system off to our west that funnels that cold air on the back side of it, on the front side of it rather, into the Great Lakes. And again, that'll continue to be the case over the next couple of days, but eventually a surge of kind of a zonal type flow will develop. And again, with low pressure systems developing in the southwest states and then moving up towards Wisconsin, that's going to bring some warm and wet conditions here as we get into the weekend, into next week. Again, we're looking at two storms here coming up over the next 5 to 7 days. That'll bring us some pretty good rainfall amounts, maybe even a thunderstorm, and maybe temperatures possibly breaking the 50-degree mark. Looks like we'll be up around 40 on Saturday and close to 45 to 50 on Sunday. We'll have to keep an eye on that. The stronger the storm, the further west it goes, the better chance we have of surging into the 50s. And you can see on the precipitation amounts yesterday forecasted, I said, we'll watch this area as the moisture begins to come out of the southwest. We'll see that spread further into the Great Lakes. And this morning, so you can see the heavier precipitation continues to spread. And again, as that second storm begins to show up on the 7-day, probably tomorrow or on Thursday, you'll see some very heavy rainfall amounts projected, I think, across much of the Great Lakes. As far as snowfall over the next 72 hours off the WPC, again, our lake effects, mainly again over in western lower Michigan, with some of the heavier snow showers making it inland, could leave a dusting to an inch across some of the eastern sections as well. And if we look at the precipitation or snowfall over the next 10 days off the GFS, again, by far, the heaviest snowfalls are going to be way back in northwest Wisconsin into the western UP. And again, we still need to track those storms, especially the one for next week. It's quite a ways off. Lots could change on that. But for right now, it looks like those storms will go well off to our west, putting us in the warm and wet sector as it looks right now. Can't rule out we could start off with a little bit of a mixed precipitation Saturday night as that first storm begins to move into the area and push that cold air out. As far as that extended outlook, you can see we continue to develop, and I've talked about how we expected that to develop across the southern states, the eastern, and then begin to push off to the northwest as a cold trough will develop out west and keeping them very cold, and a heat ridge across the southeast will begin to warm up much of the eastern U.S. here over the next 6 to 10, and the 8 to 14 day outlook also shows warm air across much of the eastern U.S. Both the 6 to 10 and the 8 to 14 continue to show it'll be a pretty wet pattern as well. So our snow will be gone by this time next week. It'll all be by the wayside unless you're in some of the lake effect areas where you have very deep snowpack. And as far as the forecast goes, again, temperatures very cold today and tomorrow. Highs in the mid-teens to around 20, maybe the low 20s as we get into Wednesday, mid-20s as we get into Thursday. Then we might crack above the freezing mark on Friday, maybe up around 32 or 33. Temperatures around the low 40s as we get into Saturday, at least the mid-40s on Sunday. And here's our storm number one that brings all that precipitation. Right now I'm forecasting about 1 inch to 1.4 inches of rain out of that system here as we get into the weekend. So we'll keep an eye on that storm. Thanks a lot for stopping by, and 73s to all.